to use later. Let's save all the questions towards the end of the session. I would recommend everyone to actually put your questions in the chat box, and from there we will start picking up and start answering and try and cover as many as we possible. To get the maximum out of this session and you want to see the complete slide, you may want to put in a basically non-video mode, in which this the multiple videos which are hanging on the side will go away, or you can use a show active video, a speaker video, so only speaker will be in a spotlight, so you get to see the entire screen. So I'll give you a quick, most of you know Rama, but I'll just quickly walk you through all, his introduction, and then we'll get going on that. As you all know, he is a very popular and a well-respected personality in Central India. Rama is a chairman and a co-founder of Exino Capital Services, a niche investment bank headquartered in Nagpur with presence in 48 countries. It is a cross-border M&A franchise that has recently been merged with a London-based investment bank to making it among the top 10 investment banks in the world as per the Bloomberg League table. He's also a co-founder of Quantum, that specializes in turning around the weak companies and facilitate the strategic sale. Professionally, he is a CA and ICWA, and many of you may not know, but he also cleared civil services mains and chose not to join the services. He's also an angel investor, and his investing arm, Core Resources, specializes in early stage investment with a high touch model, which invest in next generation disruptive startups and ideas. He was also ex-president of past president of Thai Nagpur. He likes to run a he believes in paying it forward, and through that he has been an advisory board member of Vigyan Bharati, Indian Science Movement of Government of India, and Karyakarta, or the key think tank of Vivekananda Kendra as well. So, as you see, he's blessed with multiple talents and have a deeper observation, very curious mind, vivid imagination, and a visualization and triangulation of the events. He brought everything together with his foresight and put together in this presentation to give all of us a peek of how the future will evolve with rapid innovation and adoption of technology in 21st century. Over to you, Rama.
Thank you, Hari, for the generous introduction. I must say that, like my presentation, like our presentation, some of the slides would be forward-looking, some of the slides would be futuristic, and some of these slides someone may not agree with respect to timelines or the fact lines. So to some extent, your introduction is also sort of bit of forward-looking, right? A lot of theology out there, but thank you for the generous introduction, Harish. Good morning, friends, or shall I say good afternoon, or maybe good evening to some of you out there, because I see some of you coming out for this meeting on a weekend like this across different time zones, isn't it? So it's truly a humbling experience to talk on singularity. And let me start by thanking each one of you for taking out that time on this weekend. Friends, singularity has always fascinated from time immemorial. It has fascinated, it has awed the humanity across timelines. Right from the time that the universe got created, or if at all it were created, because there are a lot of theories for and against whether it evolved or it was always out there. From that time, fast forward this very time where we are seeing this, or we are at the cusp of explosion on the technology side, and that is what we call the technological singularity or the tech singularity. So friends, what I aim to do, so the next 40 odd minutes, 10 minutes take or leave, I am going to talk about, rather Harish and I are going to walk you through as to what singularity has meant in the Vedic times, in the times when evolution was happening, to what theoretical physicists and mathematicians call a singularity. to what singularity really means in a tech world like this. And we are going to sit on a time machine. So guys, seat belts. We are on your seat belts. At the later part of the presentation, we will also end with a countdown to the singularity and how it would impact our day-to-day lives. Believe me, our day-to-day lives, the day-to-day lives of a common man, the day-to-day lives of entrepreneurs like us, the day-to-day life of professionals like us. Let me guarantee you, some of these forward-looking scenarios would be no less than a Hollywood flick on a science fiction. So take it from that perspective, and you may add or add some thoughts, add some dimensions, and everyone is perfectly all right in terms of looking at these slides and data points. So this slide, singularity, what it means for the humanity across timelines. So this is sort of a very profound slide where we sort of cover the entire spectrum of what has happened right from the evolution till what's going to happen in the next 50, 100 years. So let's come to the evolution. So in the epoch 1, these were the days of physics and chemistry. There were only elements and matter. So information, as they say, evolved in the atomic structures. String in the universe evolved. Now, what does it mean? Because for a lot of us, string theory is sort of a very high concept. So I'll bring it down to ground zero in terms of what it means and how to look at it. So look at a string theory. Imagine I come from the city of oranges. It is the orange capital to the world, right? Nagpur. So let me give an example of an orange. So look at this orange. So when we look at this orange and hold it in our hand, imagine that you're holding it in your hand and you try to magnify and get into this orange. So what do you see deep inside? You see molecules. So magnify it further and you see atoms. Magnify and deep dive further. You see protons and neutrons in this. And then go further down, you see the tiniest particles, which are called the quarks. And friends, the conventional idea stops here. This is where string theory comes in and says that there are filaments of energy within the quarks. These are also called the fields of energy. And these are essentially vibration of energy, right? And the string theory goes further down to say that the filaments or the fields of energy or the string are the same, are universal to an orange and an apple, to a human, and to any other thing in the universe, to any other matter in the universe. So friends, when I was reading the string theory, sort of I went back and said, what is it that the Indian Bharatiya Sanskriti, Ved, Upanishad, Brahma Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and other scriptures have to talk about this? Is there a reference of singularity? Is there one? And I was really baffled in terms of understanding the scriptures and trying to correlate with what the science talks about, the modern science talks about. So I'll take you through this amazing slide, which talks about singularity in Vedanta. So is there a reference of singularity in Vedanta? Obviously, singularity word is an English word. And obviously, Vedas were written well before the 10,000 BCE. So Vedanta talks about singularity or oneness. It talks about Advait, that is the word that is used. Advait means one that is non-dual, one that is one that is singular. The word refers to the English word non, and Dvait refers to the word non-dual. So there is a reference of singularity in Vedanta. So I really wanted to deep dive and understand what is this singularity all about in Vedanta. There's a very profound shlok called Aham Brahmasmi, and it's written in both Sanskrit and English. So the central theme of Advait Vedanta is Aham Brahmasmi. What it means literally, it means that I am Brahma. What does it mean? I am Brahma means there is no God called Brahma. it is talking, when you deep dive and understand the meaning of the shlok, it says that it is talking about the Brahma Dhatu or Mool Dhatu Tattva, meaning the basic element. For those of you who don't understand Sanskrit or Hindi, it is talking about the basic dhatu, the basic element, the basic building block. Now, this is where the fascination comes in. This is where the aha moment comes in, right? Be it an orange or an apple, and or a human for that matter. Everything is composed of one tiniest of the element. You call it string, you call it field of energy, you call it Brahma Dhatu. It's all the same. It's so very singular, right? And when I read these sutras, Brahma Sutras, so just to take a minute on what Brahma Sutra is to understanding Brahma Sutra from a very laymanish perspective. So Brahma Sutras are all the summarization pertaining to Brahma. There are many meanings to Brahma. The one meaning that we want to assign here is referring to the element, the Brahma Vriddha Dhatu. So when you look at the Brahma Sutra, which is a compilation of 555 shlokas or aphorisms or sutras, which have been culled out of Ved and Upanishads. So it talks about this very clearly. It talks about Brahma. It talks about Brahma being there everywhere. It talks about the Brahmand, meaning the universe consisting of Brahma. And that, to my mind, is what is this shlok, Aham Brahmasmi. So it's very fascinating when you sort of learn the modern science and string theory and try to see what Vedanta wants to tell you on this, and if there is one leaf. And it's a very fascinating sort of piece that I came to know, and I thought I should share it with you. So that's pretty much the epoch one. So Harish, you are also an avid reader in terms of Vedanta and technology. Would you like to add something to this one epoch, and then we move forward?
Yeah, so just to add to Rama's point, so the entire string theory was started, I think, with the search of a Higgs boson, the boson particle, which is also what Rama told the element, the foundational element of the universe, from where the whole thing started. And if you look at it, what that matter is actually converting into energy, and energy is converting back to the matter, right? And that energy or the intelligence which is around the world is the same intelligence or the consciousness which is in humans, which is in plants, which is in animals, and any living being. Everything fundamentally boils down to the same intelligence or the consciousness that is that is uh, uh, around us, and which is what I think one of the Aham Brahmasmi gives you the deeper meaning of that. It's we as a part of the super or consciousness are one and the same, which basically tells that everything that is happening around us and everything that is manifested in multiple forms are part of the same singular thing, or it's just manifested in multiple ways. So we keep this thought, and when we talk about universal consciousness, as we go deeper in some of the slides below, where we talk about the applications of how the technology is evolving in achieving some of these things, what we are talking in Epoch 1.
Thank you, Harish. So this Epoch 1 sort of talks about, to summarize it, the evolution of information in the smallest of the particle, call it atom, call it quark, call it string. So it pretty much lasted for a long period of time, billions of years. And then the second epoch started. This epoch the evolution of this epoch is hallmarked by DNA. DNA evolves in this epoch. Biology evolves in this epoch. Information evolves in the DNA. So that's what pretty much happening in this epoch. let me take you to a slide on biology. So many of us have heard about Carl Sagan, legendary astronomer and planetary scientist. And if you've not heard of him, you should YouTube him to a small 2-3 minute video where he talks about the pale blue dot, and that's sort of, I've heard that 100 times. So I leave you with that. But coming back to the slide on the epoch 2, what does Carl Sagan say? Carl Sagan says that, and I quote unquote him, about 2 billion years ago, our ancestors were microbes. And one is paraphrasing here. No offenses meant. 500 million years ago, they were fish. 100 million years ago, probably a mice. And 10 million years ago, the apes. And about a million year ago, thereabouts, a million and thereabouts, because it started from 1.8 million years back. So thereabouts, we were proto-humans trying to figure out how to tame that fire that comes out. So Carl Sagan says our evolutionary lineage is marked by mastery of change. So that was pretty much the second epoch. Now it is this third epoch which is what gave us some kind of quantum jump when the brain started evolving. The information and intelligence started evolving in the neural networks. And let me take you to a very small slide on this evolution of the human brain. This is how it actually transitioned. It's very fascinating to understand how the brain has evolved, particularly in the last 2 million years, from the time we were Homo habilis, right, about 1.8 million years ago, to the current day Homo sapiens. The brain in this 2 million years has almost tripled in size. So that is the kind of evolution that has happened in the epoch 3. I think, Harish, what do you say on this? I mean, you want to bring some perspective out here. So,
yeah. So, what are we guys trying to do here is basically showing you how historically the life evolved and how nature is continuously expanding and how the intelligence is using, that is getting inside the various living beings, is actually resurfacing and creating the next generation of intelligent creatures, or Homo sapiens. How the Homo sapiens are evolving. If you look at it, it's the biggest discovery that happened. Biggest invention that happened is as humans evolved. That itself was a big singularity moment from microbes to the various stages that Rama has showed to a real human being, and from apes and what we are today. So if you look at the Homo sapiens, even there are multiple Homo sapiens, and few of them were survived, and whatever the race is there right now is part of the one Homo sapien cluster that actually survived and expanded across the world now. So our brain is continuously evolving. Every next generation is actually becoming smarter. On this slide, if you look at it, how the biochemistry actually evolved, and how biology, which is what the couple of EPO 1, EPO 2, EPO 3 talked about, has evolved. So we are continuously evolving. Language has actually changed the way humans interact. Writing has changed the way how knowledge has evolved, because now we were able to store that knowledge, and that can be used by multiple generation and improve on that part. With the knowledge and the communication in place, farming has actually has exploded human population, which started with few hundred people to now we are at 8 billion people across the planet. So we as a human race have been continuously evolving, and the nature is actually continuously supporting us to evolve. But this evolution never stops. It will continue to happen. And that's where the new paradigm is evolving, which is the digital, which we talked about, which is evolving as a part of the next evolution phase. Now this digital, the boundaries, if you look at it, the boundaries between our physical and the digital space is also blurring. And that's where some of the things which we are shaping right now are going to drive the technology for next generation, which we'll talk about in EPO 4. But as you see, it's all the evolution from biochemistry to what current intelligent human beings are and how the future will evolve in terms of the technology revolution.
Great, Harish. So as Harish rightly mentioned, Epoch 4, something that it's very close to us. We have seen how technology has evolved over the last 50 odd years. And I'll quickly go through in terms of a very profound slide on technology. So we've all heard about John von Neumann. So in 1949, several decades before the birth of the PC, computer scientist John announced that it would appear that we have reached the limits of what is possible to achieve with computer technology. He said this in 1949. He hastily added, one should be careful with such kind of statements because they tend to sound pretty silly in just 5 years. So we all know what has happened to the evolution of computers, right? And half a century later, it's Neumann's caveat that has become the rule now. So this is what has happened in the Epoch 4, where technology evolved, information in the hardware and software designs evolved. So we all know this. We'll talk about in much more detail in the following slides. Next epoch, Epoch 5, is something which is profound, right? What it essentially tries to say that the future is going to be like this, where the biology is going to merge with the technology. The man is going to merge with the machine. So that's something which is profound, and we'll spend a good solid time on understanding what could be the nature of that beast. The fifth one, post the fifth one, the sixth one obviously is the artificial intelligence evolution, the evolution of the information spreading out on machines, the machines trying to mimic the humans, and that's when the universe wakes up, where you find information all across the universe, and we'll talk about that as well. Great. So guys, with this foreknote, let's quickly go back to one of the conversation on singularity. So sometime in 1893, during the Columbian Industrial Expo happening in Chicago, Swami Vivekananda, a scientific monk, a monk with a scientific mindset from India, also attended. And that's where he gave his profound lecture on My Dear Brothers and Sisters of America. The other thing that he did, which is not often highlighted, is this. If you see the photograph to the left, there's a conversation going on between Swami Vivekananda and Nikola Tesla. Many of you know Nikola Tesla, the super genius. He has over 700 patents worldwide, credited with inventing alternating current, death beam, X-rays, wireless transmission, free energy, hydroelectric power plant, and so on and so forth. I mean, has about 700 patents to his credit. So Swami Vivekananda had this very interesting scientific conversation with him, a dialogue with him. So he asked him, what is that one energy? What is that singular energy from which all other energies have manifested in the universe? He goes on to add, what is that one element from which all other elements in the universe have manifested? He further goes on to ask him to ask him to express this oneness, this singularity in a mathematical formula. Believe me, friends, it was that legendary, profound, game-changing, orbit-shifting moment. From that point in time, and you will see that rolling out, how theoretical physicists post that were just super focused on this one question. How do you formulate one single formula, a formula which is 1 inch, a small, simple, profound formula to define the oneness, the singularity in terms of that one energy, one element. Let's see what happened thereafter. During his lifetime, Nikola Tesla could not come up with this mathematical expression, which we had discussed with Swami Vivekananda. Unfortunately, Nikola Tesla died in 1943, some 50 years after that conversation. So Albert Einstein started working where Nikola Tesla left. So Einstein also wanted to come up with this one simple singular equation, which he called the grand unified theory. It is also called the unified field theory. It is a combination of the general theory of general relativity and the special theory. But it's an amazing theory that Einstein has given to us, but it failed in some of the tests. Where does it fail? When you talk about singularity in physics, and in the conversation, we'll be talking about singularity across the domains, across verticals, across time and space. So singularity in physics, what does it refer to? What was Albert Einstein referring to? Singularity in physics refers to any region of space and time where conditions are so extreme that the mathematics or the equation breaks down. Two such examples being center of a black hole, where the powerful gravitational force warps space and time so dramatically, even Einstein's equation breaks down. And similarly, it breaks down during the instance of the Big Bang. This unexplainable phenomena is defined by a fancy word called singularity. Let's see what happened thereafter. Stephen Hawking, the legendary theoretical physicist of this century, unfortunately, we don't have him, and he's no more with us right now. This legendary Stephen Hawking started working on this dream of Albert Einstein, the dream which was unfinished. He called his work the theory of everything, which went few steps ahead of what Albert Einstein said. Just to tell you in terms of what grand unified theory is, from a very simple understanding perspective, right? Because we don't want to throw a lot of jargons in this session. We want to be very simple from a day-to-day understanding perspective. Imagine a gigantic soap bubble, right? We all have played soap bubbles in our childhood. Imagine this gigantic bubble is expanding very rapidly. It is actually expanding at a very obnoxious speed called the Hubble constant. So it's expanding. And on it are insects trapped and who cannot escape. So it expands so much that it bursts after a point. And this event is called the Big Bang event. Let's come closer to what's happening right now. Many of you would have heard about this iconic Michio Kaku theoretical physicist, who's a co-founder of the string theory that we talked about early on in the second slide. So he has a different theory to propound. I mean, he sort of disagrees to some extent with Einstein and goes forward to say that his theory is not complete. And he says that there are no one bubble. I mean, the universe doesn't have one bubble. It has many bubbles. It has many bubbles, which are called the multiverses. Friends, uni means one, universe. A multiverse means many universes. So he goes on to say that there are many bubbles, many universes called multiverse. And they collide all the time in the universe, right? To make a bigger universe, right? Or they even separate due to a fission to make universities, meaning multiple universe. I mean, more than two universe. That is something that he wants to call it a Big Bang event. And this keeps happening all the time in the universe, is what Michio Kaku says. So that's on the physics part of it. Let's take a page in terms of what it means in mathematics, and then we will jump into the tech world after sort of laying down this foundation. So the Indian mathematician, we all know the Indian mathematician Ramanujan, the man who knew infinity. So mathematicians define singularity as a point which is difficult to define, or a point which becomes infinite. I mean, we all know this in abstract maths. I will not spend much time. So simply put, as x approaches 0, y approaches infinity. So this is where the real game starts in terms of our understanding of singularity and how it is going to play down or play out. So the countdown to the singularity, which is what the Epoch 5 and the Epoch 6 talks about. So before this, I would not do any justice if I don't talk about Ray Kurzweil, who's sort of referred to as the ultimate time machine, who's also referred to as the original heir to Thomas Alva Edison. He's a futurist, he's an entrepreneur, scientist, inventor, has a couple of dozen of first in terms of invention, the first flatbed scanner, the first text-to-speech synthesizer, and so on and so forth. You can Google him. Amazing, very profound, very iconic, very legendary. So he talks about the future of humanity. So I would like to quote what he said, because this 1, 2, 3 lines are very profound. The integration of the biological human, that is us, and the non-biological human, that is the machine. So he's talking about integrating them, will make the humanity live as long as we choose. He's not saying as long as infinity. He's saying as long as you would like to choose, you can live if you can integrate both of them. He further goes on to add, you may be able to upload your brain on a robot. Imagine, just think about creating one more body double, a mind double maybe, right? You have a robot which is exactly your avatar, right? In every sense, not only the body as well as the mind. You may be able to download your brain onto a robot, or even download from a machine into a biological human. Think about this. I mean, someday I would like to download the mind of Albert Einstein, right, and put it on my head. Right? Quite possible. And these are the realms of possibilities that he talks about in his book, The Singularity is Near. And he's been appreciated for all of this work. This human-machine civilization with strong artificial intelligence, we all know this, how it's playing out, on the top of it with nanotechnology, can create any product, any situation, any environment, any human. Think about that. This combination can create any human that we could imagine of. It is just an imagination way. This would be the essence of singularity in this epoch 5 and 6. Let's look at it, what's playing out as we speak, because we've talked about a lot of things. So what is it happening? Where is it happening? I'm not seeing these singularities happening, right? So the next 10, 12 slides essentially is going to talk about how this is playing out in a real world. Can I see it for myself? So a foreword on that. So the fast accelerating and overlapping revolutions, there are 3 key revolutions happening: the genetics revolution, the nanotechnology revolution, the AI, and the robotics. Combined, these are going to accelerate singularity. But very important point being, the direction of the humanity would depend upon which of these technologies would accelerate and outbeat each other. I'll tell you what it means. These are the 3 technologies, simply put. There could be a genetically modified human, biological human. So essentially what it means, and the following slides would talk about it. This would be the rise of the genetically modified human, which could sort of take the life expectancy to more than upwards of 150 years. In essence, it will be only a biological human with genetical modifications. And there's a lot of experiments going around in the world in this direction. And we'll talk about that as well. The second pillar or lever would be the rise of nanotechnologically modified human. So to some extent, this is a biological and a non-biological human, a combination of them. So one expects the life expectancy of a non-biological human could be upwards of 500 years. And obviously we all are witnessing this, the rise of the AI and robotics. The non-biological human, the humanoid, right? It could make the humanoid live forever, infinity. It's not a biological man, it's a machine. But before that, let's go down to ground zero in terms of understanding whether all of this is happening or it's just a science fiction sort of movie from a Hollywood. So let me take you back to 2017. And you all have heard about it, and many of us are coming from the Thai background. And one of the Taikons had showcased this robot, Sophia, right? This social robot, Sophia, was given citizenship of Saudi Arabia. Let's go forward. Google's, in 2018, Google's artificial intelligence Alpha Zero beats chess champion after teaching itself for 4 hours. Imagine there's a machine out there, Alpha Zero. It learns chess for just 4 hours. Not only that, it learns by itself. It learns chess by itself and then goes ahead and beats a chess champion, right? Imagine the power of computing that could happen. And that is, my dear friends, the power of singularity, which we are going to unfold. Let's go forward. A year back, you had IBM, you had Google, Microsoft, Intel, Amazon, who have achieved quantum supremacy through quantum computing. Let's go forward to, again, in 2019, I don't know how many of you have heard this. Google's parent Alphabet owns this company called Wing, which has started drone delivery in Australia and Virginia. This already started happening. They are delivering pizzas, they are delivering coffees, they are delivering bunch of things. 2020, friends, this COVID has sort of put us on a very high pedestal on technology. So Amazon Prime Air would start delivering through drones at homes and hospitals. Imagine airdropping pizzas and coffees in these times of social distancing. Wouldn't it be fascinating? Let's go to one more dimension. Emotional artificial intelligence will become embedded into the chatbots. Imagine how Alexa might respond. Harish, please don't shout at me, right? That's hurting me, right? I have emotions, right? And all of this, friends, is happening as we speak. Nothing is science fiction. All of this is happening. The technologies are out there. The use cases are out there. And large companies, startups are already working on this. Prototyping, products ready, launch is there. Go-to-market is getting planned. All of this is happening. This very year, you will find, of course, it is happening. We all know this. 3D printers would print your dress, your home, and almost everything. And we are all homebound for the last 60 odd days. You may very well want to print some new shorts or maybe pajamas. Why not? This year, Big Rep has already showcased the world's first 3D printed electric motorcycle. And what does it do? Look at the tires of this motorcycle, right? It is groundbreaking. They are airless tires. There are embedded electronics on that, built on nanoparticles and forkless steering. Some of you come from the auto side, and this would be of great interest to you. This year, it's already playing out, right? You have smart toys which have built-in machine learning. This is again going to play out as we start going out, dining. You'll find robots doing cooking, cleaning, and serving.
Actually, it's happening in Singapore already.
Right. It's so, also happening in Nagpur. There's a restaurant out here. Yeah, it's already happening, and you keep visiting to Nagpur. There's a restaurant which serves through a robot. I mean, it will be a gastronomical experience for some of you in Nagpur. Good, Harish, you're saying something.
Yeah, so it's actually happening in Singapore. In majority of food courts, they have these robots who collects all the plates. They have also put the robots in the parks and everywhere where they are keep going around and telling it's COVID-19 outbreak. Please do not do the gatherings or keep moving. Please do not do this thing. So they have been doing this thing, and they have deployed some of the local made robots, and some of them are from Boston Dynamics. So I just want to take a couple of minutes here to explain why this is happening, right? We have seen what is happening. I'll just spend a couple of minutes to understand why this is happening now and why it is happening now. So if you look at majority of you would be aware of what about the Moore's law, right? The computing power or everything, and I mean, the technology is actually doubling, and it's taking half the time it took previously to evolve the prior version of it. And Moore's law is at play, which is actually making hardware evolve. The three streams which Rama talked about, genetics and nanotech, and the tech itself in form of AI and robotics, has been continuously evolving. Computing, the hardware required in order to run this kind of a machine, the chips required to run this kind of a machine are there. Now, previously human to human communication was happening. Now human to brain machines are happening, and machine to machine is also evolving. So now, there's so many different forces are at play right now, in which your hardware capabilities are evolving, your software capabilities are evolving, the network is evolving, and most importantly, there are two things that are required to make singularity happen. First and foremost is the speed at which all the computation is happening. With the computing power growing every year, the speeds are actually reaching to a certain level where at least some of the initial experimentation will start showing some results. The second is algorithmic innovations are happening. So algorithms are becoming very smart. They are going in a self-improvement. So software is evolving continuously. They are seeing itself, I mean, the software is getting some form of self-learning, which is what the AlphaGo we talked about. Right? That's what the artificial intelligence is, where it's learning from its mistake, it's reflecting on it, it's seeing all the various patterns and the models that are happening, and that the software is becoming the brain functioning, right? How your brain functions. The software is learning to communicate. There's machine learning and NLP is happening that is actually processing the various kind of languages it's picking up. It's building a library. So basically what we are trying to do right now in this current world is replicating how our brain works. Technically, how the brain processes the information, aggregates the information, segregate it in different neurons and process the information. And then based on that information, you come up with an intelligence or a wisdom and take action accordingly. So what we are trying to do is exactly what the brain is functioning, which is what the artificial intelligence is coming in reality. So we just stepped in an era where artificial intelligence is actually becoming a reality with everything coming together. So the Kurzweil, which Rama mentioned earlier, he predicted that by 2045, we'll have the event of singularity, which means the merging of your physical and the digital world, the convergence of your biological and the physical and the technological world will start actually happening, and humans will start evolving in capabilities. I don't know how many of you have seen Matrix. If you remember Matrix, the first version of Keanu Reeves, right? It is the one movie which actually impacted me almost 20 years, 10, 15 years back. That actually tells you clearly how how you can transport your consciousness in a digital world, how you can learn new skills, which is what is happening now with the artificial intelligence. So that's from my side, Rama.
Thank you, Harish. So, so we already know about this autonomous car, and these would be soon out there in large numbers. A lot of action already happening from Alphabet's Waymo, Uber, Tesla, Cruise. So we know this already happening. So this is something interesting. With all this social distancing, robots would be found in many homes for cooking, cleaning, replacing maids. Imagine how happy our wives would be. I'm not going to go ahead and say that the men would not be happy, but I'm talking about the wives. 2022, robots will be our new school teachers. And these are all, playing out. I mean, the timelines may be here and there, but it's all playing out.
Actually, this is also happening today. I was just walking through the PPT. My son came and told that 2023, your prediction probably will come too faster for having the passenger drones, because BMW is already working on it, and Airbus and few others are working on it.
Absolutely. Audi and Airbus is working. BMW is also working. Perfect. Absolutely. So this has already started playing out. the 2023 daily passenger drones would take off in few cities in the world. You could hop in, hop off between your home and office, beating the traffic. This is something interesting. We've seen a slice of this action in a different form with all this lockdown happening, the consumption of diesel petrol tanking down. We've seen how oil has behaved in the negative territory. But believe me, this is also going to happen very soon. The demand for oil and petrol would decline significantly. With the rise of the renewables, this would be touching to sub $10 kind of time frame. Of course, space fascinates all of us. Moon could be the new home, right? Who knows? Or the transit point for Mars and Venus. The question remains for people like Harish, who also come from the real estate tech side, tech real estate side. How do we divide the real estate, Harish? Right? If elected back, the real estate baron turned president, Donald Trump has an answer though. So he's putting together a core team to sort of go to moon, and he already has a plan to divide the moon, the real estate of the moon. What do you say, Harish?
Yeah, the land grabbing has started already. We will not change. That's gonna happen.
So,
But even with Elon Musk having a plan to settle on Mars, I will not be surprised if we have colonies out of Moon and Mars.
absolutely. So that's what the next slide talks about. Between 2030 and 2050, timelines are sort of longish because there's a lot of moving factors out there to happen this kind of scenario. Humans would start living in Mars. So Elon Musk has already announced that he'll send about 1 million people to Mars by 2050. And he's already laid down his plan by launching 3 startup Starship rockets every day and creating, quote unquote, a lot of jobs on the red planet. Now, jobs for whom? Is it for the human or robots? We have to see. So this is where the quantum jump in terms of evolution happens, starting this slide. All of this, the last 10 slides, are something that are playing out and we've been witnessing in some form or the other. This slide onwards, the next 5-10 slides are going to be the quantum jump in terms of the evolution and how this is going to look like. This may to some look scary, and it is indeed, right? It is indeed scary. But of course, there are brighter sides as well. We will find in the next 20-25 years the rapid rise of the genetics. Genetics and molecular science will extend human biology, the human body, that has the capability to correct the obvious errors and flaws. What do I mean by that? You could correct your DNA flaws. You could correct some of the errors that are out there in the biology of your body. And if you eliminate 50% of the medically preventable conditions, your life automatically goes up to upwards of 150 years. And if you do it 99%, and that's not possible now, maybe it's possible at some point in time, you may end up, the biological man may end up for 1,000 years. This is what Ray Kurzweil talks about.
Just to add to your point, actually, I mean, if you look at it, a lot of money has invested in DNA sequencing, right? With CRISPR technology and few other things are shaping up how the entire DNA can be modified to either to regrow the organs or even to identify which kind of DNA is, which kind of biochemistry is in play for what kind of signals that is going to the body. If the science really gets the grasp of it and maps this whole thing, achieving 1,000 or 10,000 years is not even, I mean, it's possible. But if there's also a philosophical angle to it. If you look at historically, right, if in the rishis and the maharishis, what we had in our ancient stories, they had this power to actually live through and manage this entire thing at their will.
True, very true, Harish. Absolutely on dot. So this is what Robert Freitas, the nanomedicine scientist and nanotechnologist, has to say. I'm quoting all of this to sort of give a context, a scientific context to this, because some of them are forward-looking. Today, genetics is discovering the exact biochemical pathway that underlying two fundamental things, the aging as well as the disease. In just few years, we'll be able to reprogram our genes. That's what Harish is talking about. And we could have therapeutically cloned cells, therapeutically cloned tissues and organs. Let's look at the second lever, nanotechnology, what promise it holds for the humanity. Nanotechnology, which essentially nano means 1/1000th of 1 meter. It promises the tools to rebuild the physical world, to rebuild the body part by part, to rebuild our brain atom by atom, molecule by molecule, and could extend our life by upwards of 500 years. In fact, the research that I was doing told me 1,000 years. I've sort of mellowed it down and said 500 years. Can nanotechnology make our mind immortal? Right? That's the question that's getting discussed across among many scientists, a lot of research going on in the space. So here is one slice from that conversation. Nanobots, bots which are very small at super microscopic kind of size. Nanobots will merge with our biological brain. And there's a depiction to the left. It's only a depiction on the slide. It's not a real picture. So nanobots will expand our mind through the merger of biology and non-biology. Think about it. Imagine on your neurons, there is a nanobot which latches on, right? And seamlessly integrate and transfer information and exchange information and computes on the top of it, right? Computes on the top of the biological mind. So we will learn how to augment our current 100 trillions very slow neural biological networks. Imagine our slow biological networks. Of course, our brain is very fast, but compared to computers and the fast computing capabilities that is evolving, they're very slow. So on the top of it, if you put a machine like this, if you put on the top of a very slow neural network, a very high-speed virtual connection via nanorobotics, what kind of magic it could spin? Just imagine. 2050 and beyond, brain implants based on massively distributed intelligent nanobots will help us move from today's fixed design and fixed architecture to a fully immersive virtual reality playing out just at the click of a button. And all of this is happening. Download your brain, very exciting. Reverse engineer your brain, download your brain, upload and download your brain. These are some of the thoughts that are going on as we speak. The nanobots in our biological brain can act as wireless communication devices. Yes, it can. And it could upload and download our brain into any other humanoid or vice versa. Imagine I becoming Harish at just a click of a button, right? And Harish becomes Donald Trump, Harish, right? The real estate guy, the president. The next moment, I would be another person. I mean, that's also quite possible, right? You'd like to add something here, Harish?
Yes, I would definitely. So guys, I mean, this is a very interesting, and this has actually took my attention for quite some time because I was doing a bit of a research on brain-machine interface. So what is brain-machine interface? Basically, brain communicating with the machines and through some kind of electrodes, and then you can download all your computing or all your thoughts which are happening, transfer it to the computer, make your consciousness work through a machine. To a certain degree, Stephen Hawking tried to do some of these things as well. But look at it, think from a perspective, if all of our brain is actually sitting inside a machine and that machine gets connected, what are we creating? Remember at the start of a presentation, I talked about the universal consciousness. That's exactly what we are creating, right? If all our brain is dumped inside the machine, and the machine and all these machines are connected to each other and leverages the combined power of our brain, the combined intelligence of human intelligence across the world, that is what the overall universal consciousness is all about. And everything what we are talking here, some of you might have who have interest in Indian Vedants and other things, these things have been talked there many a number of times, right? Intuition, what is that? When you get somebody's thought about it, it's just a brainwave talking, one brain talking to the another brain far in a different part of the world. There, the teleportation, what is it? It's the energy converting into the mass, and mass again converting into energy, and you can represent anywhere. And obviously the speed defines the laws of physics, which is actually it limits by the speed of light. Or even beyond speed of light, I don't know, there might be some kind of a force or a gravity or something which actually defines the kind of speed which goes beyond the laws of physics, where it fails, especially when you talk about the black hole and things. What happens in black hole? The energy is converting into mass, the mass is converting into energy, and there's a big black hole for every galaxy, which converts this energy and creates two form of energy. Two jets are thrown. One is a high speed or a high frequency jet, and other is a low frequency beam which goes out. And then I was very curious. It happened like a couple of weeks back when my son was showing me a video on the black holes. I was very curious to understand where these energies are going. Maybe it probably actually make you think, are there multi-universes? Maybe this energy is going and powering other universes which exist out there, which is what Rama touched upon. And how are we getting energy from somewhere, and how these elements are coming together? This is very fascinating and interesting things, because at the end of the day, what we are trying to become is what the universe is all about. We are just trying to reflect the nature out there, the universe out there, the universal consciousness, or the super intelligence which works within us and around us, is what we are trying to just replicate.
Absolutely, Harish. I mean, you talked about teleportation, and there's telepathy, which we always had. Bhagavad Gita talks about both Divya Drishti and Dur Drishti, right? Telepathy, where Sanjay used to hear the conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjun in Kurukshetra. So here's the slide. There's already a professor talking about it. So this is something interesting. We talked about nanobots. Billions of nanobots, guys, listen into this. Billions of nanobots will travel through our bloodstreams in our bodies and brain. In our body, they will destroy the pathogens. They will correct DNA, eliminate toxins, and perform many other tasks which are for our physical well-being, to enhance our physical well-being. They have the potential, read the word potential. They won't completely, they have the potential to make our body immortal. Let's talk about brains now, guys. Let's go back to what Ray Kurzweil talked about. He talks about this. Nanobots will plug our brains because they will have latched on these non-biological nanobots. They will plug us straight into the cloud. Ray Kurzweil predicts that our nanobots will plug our brains to the vast cloud computing networks in real time, allowing us to gain a matrix-style instant access to the world's knowledge. Harish, you talked about the film Matrix. This is something which is profound, and I find this is going to play out because between genetics and nanotechnology and the strong AI, I mean, we all know strong AI is very near, and it's happening in a lot of places, and there are a lot of use cases on that. So to my mind, this could play out pretty fast in terms of the rise of the machine, the rise of the humanoid. Strong AI and robotics could be the most profound and game-changing in many ways. It holds the potential to leapfrog the computational capabilities by 1 trillion times. Read my words, read my lips. By 1 trillion times by end of the century. As compared to, just to compare it, as compared to a human brain, which is limited to computing 10 to the power 16 calculations per second. So imagine 1 trillion times multiplication to already that kind of computing capabilities. I think, friends, sort of spent about an hour now. Let me sort of sum up, and Harish can also jump in this conversation, and there could be time for some Q&A. If humans can be humanoids, the vice versa is also true. Humanoids can also become humans. I could become you, you could become me. I mean, think about it. All this is possible within the realm. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of reaching that accelerated computation. It's only a matter of discovering those, some of the blocks, the building blocks is out there. You've got to have it on the top of it. Isn't that what we already knew? Aham Brahmasmi in the Vedanta that we talked about in the earlier slides, in the second slide, in the Epoch 1 that we talked about. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahma. I am what you are what I am. The apple and orange and the human and the matter is all same. I mean, that is what the world probably is leading to. Isn't that interesting? So I was reading, I'm a profound reader of Swami Vivekananda, scientific thoughts, what he has to say and what he has to contribute to the science. So I want to take you through this conversation which happened 2 days before Swami Vivekananda died. And we all know Swami Vivekananda had amazing potential. He could read at very fast speed. He had the memory, like he could read a book and remember hundreds of books with page numbers and sequence and all of those stories we all know about. But when a disciple asked him a day before, when he died at the age of 39, and when this classroom session was going on and Swami Vivekananda was teaching, so he announced that I am going to die. And one of the disciple said, Guru, you can't die. There are a lot of unfinished agenda. So this is what he replied. I may leave this mortal body and expand all over the universe. And I will continue to live and work for the next 1500 years. When you read Ray Kurzweil, when you read theoretical physicists, when you read what is going to happen in Epoch 6, and go back to that second slide, where the consciousness expands to the universe, where the information and intelligence expands to the universe, right? That in a summary is what is narrated by Swami Vivekananda. So did he know of this biological way? So is there a biological way? Because we've been talking about a non-biological way of doing it. So is there a biological way to live a long enough life? I mean, to live a life in the body, to live a body which is long enough. So welcome to the Singularity, guys. And it's driven by the human quest to be a superhuman. Over to you, Harish.
Rama, this has been an awesome journey. I really appreciate the efforts put in by you and Harish in compiling all the relevant data, which is of importance today and for the human race. Overall, speaking with the current scenario, we are all jammed up in the work from home scenario, and businesses have to look beyond the horizon to scale up and to go to the next level. So we have a good strength of charter members from Nagpur. I would request anyone who would like to have some queries or would like to put in some thoughts can share the thoughts with the learned speakers here, and we could have more discussion on the same lines in which their presentation was there. I really appreciate the efforts of everyone and the time. And we also have inputs from David from Germany. I appreciate him, and with his thoughts of a cross-chapter collaboration. So, David, would you like to add something here? I know I have been following you since long, and we never met personally, but I know about you. You have been traveling to India and the globe.
I'm honored. Thank you, Nitin. In fact, I have read Harari, I have read Einstein's biography. I'm a civil engineer, and I find the theme very, very striking. My son studies bio computer science. So the family likes this playing around with the idea of what the future will bring. As president of TIE Germany, we are having a chapter-to-chapter exchange with the other chapters to get to know each other a bit more personally in these times. And seeing the faces, you see me, I know I'm getting gray, but inside I'm very youthful. I really enjoy technology and everything, and I would love to do a chapter-to-chapter exchange with you people in wait a minute, in
Nagpur.
Nagpur. Yesterday we exchanged with New York, and we had guests from Ajay from Hubli and Akila from Chennai. So I will invite Nitin and perhaps Nidhi to join us on our next chapter exchange to see what it's like, an elevator pitch, and then a short presentation on an interesting topic. And it could be the beginning, because I've mentioned in the chat before, you have mentioned 3 companies from Germany: Audi, Airbus, which is Germany and France, and BMW and others. Maybe we can do something that will make Thai making the link between the 2 fields. I know it's very theoretical, but you never know. If you don't try, you don't find out.
Absolutely, David. Like we really appreciate your offer, and we are all in. So from Thai Nagpur, like I give you full commitment for this joint chapter collaboration. And honestly speaking, this series of event what we are hosting is a CM social event only. So just to take it to the next level, we have included the Impact Speaker Series in between our weekly CM Social series of events. So just to connect with the other CMs from global chapters. I welcome your thought.
Can I ask a question to Rama and Harish, please?
Yeah, Rita, please go on.
So Rama and Harish, this is really futuristic and quite mind-boggling and disturbing as well.
Yes.
But my question is that we have always understood technology to be a tool to help the human being. My understanding of technology is, when I use technology, it's there to help me live a better life and to elevate my standards of life or quality of life. But the presentation that you've done is like, are we aiming to merge with technology and become like a machine? So how much part of us would be a machine? I mean, I'm sure you may have the answers or you may not, but this is my query, which is disturbing me. Like, how much part of us would be machine and how much part of us would be a human? That's one question to you. And the second question is, I have not understood the connection to the thought of universal consciousness and technological singularity. The connection between the 2 is not clear to me even now. That's it.
Okay, great. So there are 2 parts of the question. The first part I can answer. Second part I'll talk about Harish. So you are absolutely right, Rita. So when you look at technology, or for that matter, let's say talk about humans, right? Not all humans are good. So therefore, this conversation has always been happening. People like Stephen Hawking have been saying that AI could be disastrous. So therefore, this concept of AI for good has been discussed all the while. Yes, technology, when you try to put in the technology, and there are a lot of science fiction movies also, when you build some technology, obviously it will fail. It doesn't today have the capability to emotionally understand things, right? And obviously it could be disastrous, it could be scary. And when I was reading this for quite some time now, and it scared me as well. I mean, you are no loner. I mean, it scares when you look at something. When we all work in a biological world, the touch and feel world, right? It is scary. Indeed, it is scary. So therefore, it's more responsible. The larger question, Rita, is, can we stop it, right? So how to stop it? I mean, how to stop it? I mean, how to stop the computer? So we all know the mobiles are very are dangerous, right? We all know that children are going to learn online from the online schooling for the next 1 year, right? They're going to spend 8-10 hours doing online stuff on laptops, and so that's definitely the right question. As humans, we have to become responsible, and we have to use AI for good. So on the consciousness, Harish, you would like to pick up and talk about?
Yeah, I'll just give my perspective on that. So let's consider what is universal consciousness. It's basically the intelligence that is all around the world, which works within us, which works through the plants and animals and everything, that is keep evolving. What is the singularities trying to do? as a human consciousness, we are merging and enhancing our capabilities to become a superhuman and getting connected with the overall cloud or the brain across the world, and actually download your capabilities or skill sets on the go, as in when you need. The boundaries between physical world and digital world is already blurring right now. Think about it. With the COVID-19, a lot of things have actually becoming much more digital, right? We have we manage relationships through Facebook, social media, and everything. A lot of that is done in a digital world. We do banking, that happens in a digital world. We do shopping, that happens in the digital world. It's just a matter of time where AR and VR will come, and basically you are transferring and shifting everything what is happening on a physical world happening in a digital world. Basically, are you living in a world of Maya, and there is basically no distinction what is digital, what is real. The physical world, what we see, is also a manifestation of the thing that happens inside our mind first, and then it actually reflects outside. There was a message I was reading about, I think Sania mentioned that she was a coma survivor, and then she came out of her that state through sattvic food and lot of healing. But there are a couple of very good videos you should actually see on Netflix called, one is Secret and other is Healing. So it's a fantastic video that tells you there is intelligence in our body which actually continuously evolving, and if you let it heal, the nature will heal things automatically. The COVID-19 has proved that, right? The 2 months, nothing happened in the world, and the world is actually getting in shape. The rivers have cleaned, the nature has evolved, the water is much more cleaner, the air is cleaner, so that whole intelligence is working on itself. Probably humans are the biggest virus to this nature, which is actually creating this problem, which shouldn't happen. I mean, if we let nature do the job, we are every one of us are evolving and trying to become the super consciousness, which is what we call moksha, right? Which is what our Vedanta journey is to reach there, which is what this technology is driving to take couple of steps towards the process. That's why I said it's somewhat on those lines.
Nitinji, can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure. Please go on.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to Rama and thank you to Harish for giving such an awesome presentation. Rama, you quoted many things of various philosophers and various scientists who are working. And one thing just was there that I had read one book way back, 5-10 years back, that is The Chariots of God. It was written original by a German author, Erich von Däniken, and then was translated to English by Michael Heron. Basically, his concept says that this human civilization which we are talking of, it is given to us by some ancient astronauts who are doing time travel. So, with relevance to singularity and all, some people who are having such type of views, and this is a very popular book. I don't know whether you people have read it or not. What is your say on this to Rama and Harish both?
Hey, look, Avinash. So a lot of this discussion, when we do these kind of discussion, and these are very fascinating discussions. But when you talk about science, you want solid proofs, right? We can definitely discuss about it. That's a very likely and possible scenario, because I personally believe, and there are two thoughts to it. I mean, the universe got created, right? The universe always existed, right? I am a very strong believer of the universe always existed theory. And why do I say that? Because there are multiverses, and I'll come down to your answer also, just to give a small footnote. So the universe, there is no universe, there is multiverse. like there are billions of planets, there are billions of galaxies. Like there are trillions of planets, there are trillions of galaxies, and possibly billions of universes. If this is right, and to some extent string theory talks about it without putting any number out there, I'm just putting a number to sort of get a context there. If that is true, then this Big Bang is just one small speck, is just one small event that happened 13.77 billion years ago. What it also means is the Big Bangs have been happening all the time for many billions of years. That means the life existed elsewhere in not only in other solar system, not only in other galaxy, but also in other universes, universities, or multiverses. From that standpoint, there is a possibility of what you're saying, and this has all to be possibilities. These are possibilities because no one can prove them. These have not yet been proved. Have I answered you, Avinash?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, Harish, sorry
Sorry.
to interrupt. Yeah, we have 9 more minutes on the session. So Harish, if you can take up a few questions which were there on the screen.
Yeah, just
Can I
ask.
ask a question?
Yeah,
Yeah, please.
Hi, I had put my questions on the screen. I'm Sonia from Dubai, and I love the talk about multiverses because I was one of those lucky people who've actually experienced the multiverses in my way back. But my questions are more immediate. One is, how can we tap into singularity science and spirituality like the Vedanta to improve what we do with our brain or tap into our bigger brain power? The second one is, how would 3D printing and self-sufficiency through DNA healing actually change our markets and impact the food and food nutrient markets? So these are my 2 more immediate questions.
Okay. Harish, you want to pick me up the
Yeah,
first?
I'll take the first one, Rama.
Okay,
I
good.
think, Sania, it's how was your experience moving through multiverses? Would love to hear first before I go and give you the thought on that, because that's a very unique experience.
At that stage, I think this we should do offline because there are a lot more people who want to ask questions, but I'll just drop an email.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a really life-changing experience. But yes, there are very many parallel universes, and you actually have physical experiences in all those universes. So I want those blessed people to be able to come back and live with that.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing, and you should watch that movie Heal, and that's why I said you will. There are a couple of similar experiences. There are few people who have gone through similar experiences, and all of them were actually shot in that movie. Your initial question was on how do
you
we
know just one more point. Do you know that intuition point that you put out, that transference of energy? Now that happens because every time in Rashid Hospital, when someone goes into coma, they call me to touch the hand and feel the energy, whether the person will survive or not before they take them off the plug. So that intuition, I don't know how to put it into words, but it is an experience that I go through, and it's often very painful when the person is giving up. You go through time and time again, and you realize how many different universes people are.
Correct. So, coming to your question on how do we really tap it, I think meditation is the way to tap it, and that has been proven across the ages, and it's timeless. As your mind calms down and reaches to its core nature, it unlocks a lot of energy within you. It unlocks and takes away all the stresses out of your body and unlocks the true potential within the human form, whatever we have. The deeper you go, the higher energy levels will start evolving. That's one of the way to do it, I guess.
Just to add, amazing explanation, Harish. Sania, wonderful question, because end of the day, how do we sort of tap into this? How do Vedanta and modern science blend? So just to take you back in terms of what meditation is, the English word meditation is derived from the word median. So it's not right to understand from an English word perspective, but from the meaning perspective. It's coming from the word yog in Hindi. So yog in Hindi or in Sanskrit, yug, yuj or yug means union. Yog means union. So when you read the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the Ashtanga Yoga, one understands that it is talking about union and not yogasans. Hatha yoga, the exercise that we do, yogasana, they are physical exercises. We are here talking about the elevation, evolving, going to the higher level. So, yoga means uniting your body with the mind, number one. And at the second level, like what Harish is saying, going deeper, you unite your mind with the universal mind. Now, we don't want to sound philosophical here, but if you go to the second slide of epochs, there, and also the slide of the one element, the one field energy, the one filament of energy, it's all one. The Brahma Dhatu, the filament of energy, the field of energy. So you are essentially trying to tap in, and that's what Ray Kurzweil also is talking about. You tap in your mind to the universal mind, the data out there, the information out there, the wisdom out there, the intelligence out there. And that's how the rishis in the yesteryears could imagine and write down scriptures, right? There is a whole range of Ayurveda medicine out there. There's a whole range of yoga, shastra out there. They didn't read and write. They imagined and wrote. So probably the answer lies there, and probably that's what Swami Vivekananda also understood the power of yoga, and he was a very profound yogi. When we say yogi, he used to meditate for hours together. He used to meditate for days together, right? I'm using Swami Vivekananda as a metaphor because I don't want to travel back on time and say this ex-rishi and jump into some conversation that this rishi did not exist. There are no historical evidence to that, and those conversations are never ending, so I'm not getting into those conversations. But it also sort of answers your question in terms of yoga as an answer to blending our spiritual sciences to the modern sciences. And to that extent also answers Rita's question about the scare of the humanoid. So how do you up your potential and evolve yourself into a larger being?
Hi, this is Chandraprakash here. Can I add something over here?
Go ahead.
Yeah, see, basically regarding Rita's apprehension that she had mentioned, I think more of that has to do, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the more of that actually prevails with a lot of people around us. And the reason also why it happens also is because what we're discussing is quite a futuristic version of how the humanoid is going to evolve. So we are seeing something like maybe 40, 50 years down.
Actually, Krama, if I would also want to add to that same point, okay, and Nakul here.
Yeah, Nakul.
Well, if you say humanoid, right, what we're doing is basically adding something which is non-human to a human body. As medical professionals, honestly, we are doing this day in, day out. We are putting artificial hip, knee, lung, liver, heart, so to say. So the progression is there, and what this has done essentially is changed our life expectancy from 40 years to 80 years in a span of 60 years, right? So, so this change is pretty dramatic. So to imagine that it will change from 80 to 120 or to 150 is not that far-fetched.
Yeah,
absolutely. I completely agree. Nakul, you have been doing a lot of nano particles on the dentistry side, and it is just going to one step forward in doing that.
Right. So yeah, like this is happening in routine, and honestly, if you think about it, if I think about it after your presentation, I am creating a humanoid every day by placing a metal screw in their skull, right? But it really changes the way we eat, we live. So uh, uh, it's happening routinely is the point. And so not everything about it will have a negative consequence. It's also, we should see the glass as half full than half empty more.
But just to add yeah, go ahead.
Can I add that the best example to me of singularity is people belonging to an organization, voluntary organization, sitting right from Far East in Singapore to people sitting in somewhere in US or Germany or Dubai, talking about the same topic, and all their minds are on the same wavelength. So we have achieved that singularity in fact.
That's brilliant example.
Only it has to manifest. I think it has to just manifest.
Wonderful.
And there always has been a question, because those who have read Harari and others, the question always is whether, like that movie and Encounters of Close Kind, where the artificial intelligence takes over the mankind, would there be in some time of tomorrow a fight between the AI humanoids and the human, and who would win them? I have always been a die-hard optimist, and I has always believed that mankind has always come over any great difficulty it has come in their lives. Like the COVID also, we will overcome this as well. So whenever we come to that time, in some time of tomorrow, it won't be the humanoid, but it would be human who would always emerge as a victorious. That is what we have to keep in mind when we look at this book, which is like a travel to the future. Fantastic job, Rama and Harish. Great. You have made my day.
That's amazing summary. Thank you very much, Dilipji. You summed up it completely. Good. So are we out of time now, Nitin?
Yeah, we are almost on time. Just
Okay.
2 minutes past 12:32. Yeah. So if anyone else would like to add something, we have Paresh today with us. Rajat, if you are still there. Anyone from Nagpur TiE?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I couldn't get you, Nitin. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Would you like to add something here?
No, that was, it was an amazing experience. I would like to thank Rama and Harish for this wonderful session. This was literally, a journey to the future. What's going on. It was really amazing. This 1 hour of mine was like mind-boggling. A lot of thoughts coming across. What's lies there is in future, and maybe a lot of things are very scary, of course, as Rita has mentioned. But at the same time, I feel there are a lot of positives and a lot of good things to gain into. And maybe yes, I guess the future is good, I would say. Yeah. Thank you, Rama. Thank you, Harish. Thank you, Tai.
Great. So formally we'll come to the end of this today's session, but this is not the end to our discussion for the topic. We would meet again with the similar topic, with similar set of minds, speaking again on some brilliant developments in technology in times. I thank all the participants and the special efforts by our speakers for today, Ramakrishnan and Harish. Both of you have put in a lot of efforts here in bringing all to this wonderful journey. I thank Nidhi for organizing this session as well. Thanks. Thank you all. Looking forward for your participation again in the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much, folks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rama.
Thank you. Without you, it wouldn't have been possible.
And I saw you smiling in between as well.
Yeah, this is so close to reality now, what we are saying. It only brings a lot of similes back from the past where this was thought impossible, and now it's distinctly possible and in execution. So we are seeing future of healthcare to the point where just putting a palm on a machine will give a full diagnostic, including genetic mappings of the person and what would be future ailments all of that is distinctly possible today. So that's not even future anymore.
Absolutely.
So there was an interesting question in between where I think Rita had mentioned saying you still need a mother for a child to be born. And that is no longer the case, because the 9-month development of a child in a womb has almost been fully decoded. In fact, the interesting piece was it was our very own Reliance which was at the forefront of that development. And they have been able to decode 7 months of a child's development. And part and parcel of that is the organ harvesting programs that they're doing. But we are a thin line close to artificial nurturing of a child from an embryo stage to a full-grown child being born artificially without the need of a mother's womb anymore. Science has reached that level, and it's scary. And at the same time, if it goes in the right hands, the possibilities are immense and beautiful. Going in the wrong hands, the negative outcomes are still disastrous.
That's true. There's a lot of debate on the ethical use of all these genetic nanotech advancement and the AI. That can actually destroy the human race, or that can actually really bring out the best of the human race. It really depends how the collective minds of the world who may shape up this future work together. Because
but I'm confident as a human race, we'll put some boundaries around it on how we want to utilize these things and be able to deal with it for the betterment of society rather than for the detriment. A lot of what we said of transposing the human brain or being able to replicate that, well, that's a distinct reality in the near future, can have damaging impacts as well.
Correct.
While it can really help an epileptic person regain full life in I would say full bloom format, or a blind person getting eyes, but if somebody could transpose Rama's or your brain and be able to replicate what you're thinking overnight, that's very dangerous too, right?
Exactly. It's hacking in somebody's brain can be a very dangerous thing. And that is also a big problem.
I think part of the future intrigue is the beautiful possibilities that can emerge with technology if used well.
Correct. That's always the case.
But excellent session. Sorry, I had to switch off to get on to another call. But an excellent session. I think the purpose is served. What I saw at the few questions and the chat groups going in is that you had tickled the thinking minds in everyone. And that's purpose served for the session.
Yeah. Made everyone think. So world is a range of possibilities. How will it evolve depends on the humanity and the people driving that during that point of time. And what is the overall collective mindset? Anyway, is becoming much more populist right now, but hopefully things will start shaping up in a few years' time. Great. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. It was a really good session.
Thank you.
And
amazing.
You should have maybe I think, Nitin, if we need to have some kind of a follow-up discussion or anything, we can plan for it.
Definitely. I would love
on
to.
the lines. Yeah, that is because we see a lot of interest and a lot of things happening. We can deep dive on some of that. It would be good.
Amazing format, Nitin. You conceptualize the format, right? The impact series. That's awesome. And sort of spread it across the whole network, right?
Rama, you are being very humble here. I must appreciate. The impact is created by only the speakers here. I'm just a moderator to that.
I mean, a moderator is like Krishna, the moderator of the Mahabharata, right? He was also a moderator, a mere charioteer. Isn't it?
I love that example.
Well said.
So next time maybe we can have like some other speakers, including Rajat.
Yes.
And yeah.
I think we should have a complete tech panel and ask them how the future is evolving for them in the next 2-3 decades.
Right. So we have come up with a new format we discussed, and regarding different like SIG's and their interest groups. So we would be like having more such sessions. And I saw Aditya, like who was silently listening to everything. So he's also a great speaker in these topics.
Okay.
Aditya Saraf. Yeah.
And yes, he speaks well.
Yeah.
Definitely speaks well. He's not there right now, but I think we have a wonderful team and wonderful talent out here, and this one media or opportunity to go out in the world. I mean, we often talk about speakers, bringing speakers to Nagpur, right? Let's say starting point to taking speakers to the world from Nagpur, and we have an amazing one. We have a large battery of them.
And we were fortunate to have like people from overseas chapters and presidents from other chapters today.
Perfect.
So it's the globe is shrinking for us. We are truly going to the outside galaxies, the billions of the galaxies which are out there.
Very well.
So Milind, any inputs from your side?
Great going. And in fact, like the idea of singularity, right? So it has gone into so many minds with the help of Rama and Harish, right? So that's how things from one brain going into another, right? Maybe through mechanical means, right? That's all going to happen. And taking it like this with the new team at TIE is really so fascinating to see. And I'm sure we are going to have many such conversation-based, team-based sessions. So Nitin and team is absolutely on the track. So let's keep it having more and more.
Thank you so much, Milind, for your inputs. And this year we have changed of the format for TIE post bearers and the board a little, wherein we brought in the immediate past president as well as a mentor to the board. So we appreciate your efforts, Milind, in handholding us and the entire GC and the past president's team. So this board works in accordance with the GC's thoughts, and that's the reason we are like all together in like our thinking, and we are all growing on the same direction. So I thank the entire GC and all the past presidents and the contribution by all people on different committees. So let's
awesome idea, Nitin. That's what gives us the succession, a very smooth succession. Amazing.
Absolutely.
Right. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
I know like we can go on endlessly discussing, talking.
Absolutely.
And at least today's topic, I must appreciate, brought in a lot of smiles and a lot of good positive thoughts in everyone's minds.
True. There are a lot of optimists out there in the audience.
In Rana and past President Milind, I will surely join such SIG. I think that topic is very interesting, where the border is technology and esoteric. Wow, very tough.
We love your thought, David, and thank you so much. And we'll look forward to hosting you at Nagpur as well soon.
We'll come.
Sure. Thanks.
Hopefully soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.